Hey guys, so the New Jeans girls are united. They stand as one. They have one voice that's not auto-tuned when they're talking about their lawsuit and future without ADOR and HYBE. Now, do not believe any of the reports out there that say that there might be some rift, that there might be some conflict among at least one of the mothers and fathers. Do not believe any of that, because the parents themselves went on their modified, took down Instagram account to say that you guys should not believe anything that is out there about any of them having any problems, because they are united, you guys. So don't believe those things. Just like we believed that they were bullied in the hallway, just like we believed that Eyelid copied them, just like we believed that New Jeans Mama's plan and PowerPoints and documents to steal a label out of HYBE was just her way of relieving stress, just like we believed that they never met with the DARVO CEO to seek outside investment, and just like we believe that they were all oblivious to these machinations because they were just naive, and that their parents would never, ever be involved in any sort of plot where the prize is a lot more money. We believed all of those things, and we should continue to believe what they say, especially during their last hurrah on an international media tour, because it seems the Korean media no longer believes. And it was a short-lived international media tour, because even that ran its course, because it's not looking good for them. They're scared that they might not be able to do this work. They're about to explode. It's heartbreaking. But this is just the beginning of a multi-year lawsuit. It's going to be a long road, and we saw the first milestone last Friday, where they had their first hearing. First hearing among many that's going to be spaced out between 2 to 3 months. So this can take all the way up until the end of their contract. So they may be worried that they may not be able to do this work anymore. But ADOR from this legal case has shown us that, wow, it's almost like a natural wonder how they are really approaching this legal suit and are in it to win it. But I mean, you thought maybe Gwyneth Paltrow was quiet luxury in the courtroom when she had to do something with that skier. HYBE and ADOR are taking it to a whole new cashmere level that does not even get out of the beige category. So I have said before that if the JIT graduates can't be like succubuses on the innocent and good-natured and people who are patient and willing to see that perhaps there's a misunderstanding here, and then they just get run over. Once that no longer can happen, it turns into like a train to Busan and not a train to the JIT. They will cannibalize each other. However, according to the parents, there is no such thing. Absolutely not. Let's take a look at their Instagram post. They're saying that the reports from some media outlets claiming that there's a division among the members' parents are completely untrue, and that they're making this statement to correct any misunderstandings. They're doubling down, saying all 5 members are firm in their stance that they can't return to HYBE, and that they would not proceed with any legal action unless all 5 of them agreed, and that this demonstrates their deep trust and unity. That sounds like those couples that renew their vows a month before they get divorced. They go on to say the five members frequently meet and maintain their strong friendship, and so do the parents. They've also strengthened their bond through regular communication through these challenging times. And they're deeply disappointed that there's so many baseless rumors about a family discord or a member leaving being published in the media. And then they go on to say, like, the rumors around one particular member and her family are totally false. So you should stop with these one-sided speculations, and that the family is experiencing extreme emotional distress. And actually, they're just like bringing out the receipts from the closet. They said that this process of adjusting parental authority out of respect for a minor's wishes was a matter concerning a different member. In that case, both the child and the mother were firm in their decision. We'll go over it a little bit, but there's some messy family court situation going on that they wanted to clarify. And they said that, you know what, we are fully respecting and supporting our children, and don't be talking about our family. No, this is family business. Well, I don't know why they're being so dramatic.
Why are you being like this? So dramatic.
Because it was the judge himself in the first hearing who asked about this family court dispute and asked about whether this was even valid. So these court people, these judges are pretty good about being like, first of all, like procedural, you know? Is this all I's dotted, T's crossed in order to come to this courtroom? Because you don't want to do all this work and have it be like, oh, well, actually, this doesn't work out really because one of the members, their families are disagreeing, and two of the members are minors, which means like when there's a court situation, you have to have the parents sign off. And the reports out there were saying that one of the members' parents, the mother and the father, were disagreeing, and that there's some family court issue to essentially eliminate one of the parents so that that parent would not have any legal leg to stand on or say in the matter, and the one that is all aligned with this train out of HYBE would be the parent who can sign off on everything. And so the judge wanted to ask about whether that issue of representation had been resolved. And the lawyers from Eugene said that, oh, well, you know, family court is ruling, you know, next week, so that's this week. And so they're going to basically lop off the parent who's opposed to standing firm against HYBE and never going back to ADOR. Now, that wasn't the main thrust of what the judge said, because it did not look good for New Jeans. And if it was a media play situation, this is quite strategic on the part of the parents, because they're trying to bring the focus onto some family law dispute, even though that makes them look worse. But their message that they can get across in that is like, we are united. Well, united or not, the judge is thinking like, what the heck is going on with this? So the judge is saying the main thesis point is that, this whole issue of loss of trust is a little bit weird from what I have seen before. So New Jeans is claiming because of loss of trust, therefore, hey, we can just get out of our lease and just, run off and, not have to pay the security deposit or any penalty because there was loss of trust. And then ADOR is saying that there is no loss of trust. This contract is valid. So this whole thing about like, was there loss of trust? Does that give New Jeans the ability to just cancel their contract and run off? And the judge is already saying that your claims, New Jeans, don't fall in line with what is usual when an artist comes to court and says there's loss of trust. And when it gets to that stage, apparently the artists actually have a better track record in leaving, because what usually happens 99% of the time is that loss of trust is tied to money, that the artist didn't get paid what they were promised or what was in their contract. And so the loss of trust wasn't because of like, ooh, Bang Si-hyuk didn't say hi to me properly in the elevator. It's basically like loss of trust because the company has been screwing the artist out of their payments, their royalties, or doing funny business with money. And as we've said before, the court is really geared towards losses and damages that have a financial paper trail. That is the best scenario to be able to win or lose whichever side you're on in the court of law. And the judge was saying, not only has there not been any of this situation where there's loss of trust tied to money, but you guys have been paid a lot of money, and so there's no loss of trust there. And he said that, okay, well, loss of trust requires careful interpretation. I'm going to have to really consider this, which is essentially him saying that, look, this doesn't look good for New Jeans. Like, these arguments don't really make sense, but we're going to give you all the time you want in the world, essentially, to give me evidence. Just basically do my homework for me so I can get a promotion. You know, these expensive lawyers are supposed to, hand him, good point. Okay. Put that into my ruling. And so he's saying like, okay, well, this is not cut and dry. So basically that means we're going to need some fancy lawyering and for it to be into a ruling, especially if it looks like he's going to, if he has to side with New Jeans, then that legal case has to be way stronger on New Jeans' side. So going into this, all I'm saying is that the cards are stacked against New Jeans because the past precedent for these types of cases where the judge would side with the artist have to deal with some sort of financial funny business. And it's the opposite in this situation. So ADOR argued that, you can't unilaterally contract terminate, especially back in November 2024, because there was no procedural and legal grounds that the deal signed in April 2022 would be able to be canceled. But New Jeans said that the trust between the parties had irreparably collapsed, particularly after the removal of ADOR CEO Min Hee-jin. And that is another situation where we'll go into in a little bit that ADOR trapped them in, and it looks like they're not going to be able to get out of that. But the judge continued to ask, all right, I don't want to, this is a headache, okay? Because if it was just a matter about like, y'all weren't being paid, okay, boom, 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 pay them. But this is just like, this is gonna hurt my brain, and I'm gonna have to type a little bit more than I had to normally. And he said, like, are you guys willing to just settle this out of court, get it out of the courtroom, and just come to an agreement? And ADOR's said that, yes, we are willing to pursue an agreement. However, New Jeans' legal team said that, oh no, the group is not in a good mental state to consider a settlement at this time. Now, the big issue that New Jeans is trying to make in terms of now what they're trying to say about loss of trust because the bullying thing didn't work, that, Min Hee-jin left and ADOR got rid of Min Hee-jin. But ADOR is saying that Min Hee-jin voluntarily resigned after refusing to work under a new CEO. New Jeans argued that she was ousted and replaced by somebody who was directly under HYBE's control, and then so that fundamentally changed what ADOR was about, and they didn't feel comfortable working there, as if they have the right to dictate who the CEO of their label is in order to feel comfortable. And this is how ADOR pulled a real fast cashmere crochet move on New Jeans. They said that New Jeans successfully did their Hong Kong show without Min Hee-jin. Therefore, y'all don't really need Min Hee-jin. You guys are doing well. You guys did a good job. Even though, I mean, we all know what happened at the complex con. It was a little bit too complex for their con. But ADOR is playing it like, well, yeah, we supported them and we had nothing to do with it. And they could now prove it to a T that they had nothing to do with it because the ADOR team that was dispatched at the last minute to go help New Jeans was ghosted. And so it was all done by non-ADOR, non-HYBE, and supposedly just New Jeans all by themselves. Why is this a trap? Because if they say, no, Min Hee-jin helped us and organized the whole thing, therefore we need her, then immediately tampering. If Min Hee-jin was involved in if she had any of her fingers on that complex con thing, then boom, there would be legal infractions for her cases and probably this case here. And so they've basically forced New Jeans to say that, well, yeah, we did it all on our own. Therefore, you don't need Min Hee-jin in order to succeed. And therefore, you can't say like, oh, you can't be an artist because you don't have your Min Hee-jin. Moreover, ADOR reiterated how Min Hee-jin was offered a position to continue on and stay at ADOR as New Jeans' main producer until the end of their contract. However, Min Hee-jin had left. So this wasn't a case where Min Hee-jin was fired out of ADOR. She was just voted out of the CEO position, which shareholders have 100% priority or prerogative to do. And Min Hee-jin herself may have actually shot herself in the foot because when she had that injunction to keep her on as CEO, I think that was the time when HYBE was acting a little bit more normal, as a normal human, fiery, angry. We got to get her out of there. And yet Min Hee-jin was the one that kept herself in that position and then and I think forced HYBE to then literally go 360 legal, just figure everything out so that it's going to be a masterclass in legalese. And so what they are doing now, that's been very clear, that's paying off, like they, even HYBE has said, oh, our approach with the whole New Jeans, Min Hee-jin situation, especially legally, is paying off. The crux of that is that they had to suppress and tamp down any emotion they may have had. And it didn't make sense to us at first, and probably even legal people at first. Why are they still letting Min Hee-jin stay on the board? Why are they letting her stay on as producer? Why is HYBE and ADOR continuously supporting and funding New Jeans, even though they've made declarations along the way that they're not going to be part of ADOR, they hate ADOR, they're going to leave, they're making all of these threats, and yet even throughout then, that whose carnival van was that? Okay, whose managers were those? Up until a certain point that we saw, them outfits still looked good, and then it looked like something happened at the Hong Kong trade show. And so we were kind of perplexed about how accommodative it seemed that ADOR was. But the main strategy was that ADOR needed to continuously, and even now, maintain that there is no breach of trust from their side, no breach of contract from their side. There's nothing that New Jeans can point to and blame them for that actually seems to make sense. And this is where it may be worth taking out your pencil and pad and taking notes, because yes, it really started with the lawyers who knew the specific law inside and out, but it also takes a client that is willing to go along with this legal advice that does not match their emotions, right? Their emotions is like, well, we need to obliterate them and get them back for all. I can't believe that they're doing this to us, that they're going to learn a lesson. Now, had they done that immediately, and actually had they won against Min Hee-jin's original injunction to keep her there, I think in this situation now, it would be a much worse scenario for HYBE, because now I think it's become very clear what the game was with New-Jean's mama. Because when you really look at some of their claims that, oh, Islet was copying us, or, oh, like, they're attacking me because they're like kejoshi and I'm just, as Min Hee-jin, a woman who is an underdog in the workplace. I think what she was trying to do was bait every single person in HYBE so that when they come back with this vitriol after her press conference, especially June, July, August, September, if they had come back and said like, I can't believe you're doing this, like you did us so wrong, if it was argumentative, if it was combative, if it was like, I can't believe you're doing this, well, we're gonna cut off your, carnival van, you're gonna ride in a bongo truck, then New-Jeans and New-Jean's mama would have much more ammunition to say, look, breach of trust. Look, they are not treating us right. Look, they're bullying us. But because HYBE and ADOR were literally still as room temperature Grey Goose vodka, they had to repeat, New-Jeans had to repeat the same tired claims of bullying or breach of trust that were never really strong in the first place and that have been debunked repeatedly from different angles since then. Now, this is where I think New-Jeans was showing their cards without realizing it, because they keep saying that Min Hee-jin was kicked out. However, she wasn't kicked out. But they keep saying Min Hee-jin was kicked out because I think that was in the original script that they planned. Because had HYBE and ADOR been really angry and ruthless about this and actually kicked out Min Hee-jin, then in some ways there is a foothold for New-Jean's claims that, oh, well, because you kicked out Min Hee-jin, we can no longer trust ADOR. Even though, in a sense, that even had HYBE kicked out Min Hee-jin, that still doesn't invalidate the contract. But the media play could be shifted towards HYBE and ADOR kicked out Min Hee-jin, how bad are they? And therefore, and not to mention there was this hallway, and not to mention there was that elevator, not to mention, and it would have still perhaps been able to, in a manipulative way, keep the media on the side of New-Jeans. But because ADOR and HYBE were acting so demure and mindful, there was nothing for them to really react off of. And it doesn't make sense what the New-Jeans girls are saying. So HYBE essentially reversed DARVO. A lot of you guys have been saying that the New-Jeans mama, New-Jeans team, wherever, the whole bunny land, especially the toxic fans, are a poster child for DARVO. Deny, attack, reverse, victim, and offender. So they're being the bullies, they're being the offenders, but they reverse it so that they're the victim. You're the offender for bringing it up. And before that, they deny, attack, and reverse. And in a way, you know how like bacteria needs to feed off of sugar or something? Well, this DARVO, in order for it to work, really depends upon the victim reacting, defending themselves, and getting flustered and upset. If you don't have that, then it's really hard for how are they going to deny or attack or reverse something that's not there if it's just mute? Now, this is a very risky strategy, I think, or it doesn't really work for normal people in the real world. That's why I think this is so interesting to see that it's totally working in the legal world for HYBE and ADOR, because a lot of times if you don't say anything, if you don't defend yourself, then people will assume that whatever the bully is saying is true and that you can't defend yourself because you're in the wrong. I've experienced this myself where I felt like, okay, sometimes no response is a response. That being calm is going to give you more credibility in a situation. Not responding to baseless attacks will give you more credibility in a situation. And I would say the amount of people who can actually read that is smaller than you would think. And if you don't respond and, don't clap back, then people are going to think like, oh, well, maybe you're guilty and you have nothing to say. And so that's why that this whole legal strategy from HYBE and ADOR it's totally opposite of our normal human psychology of wanting to defend ourselves, and even opposite to this situation where, you can't usually take the risk a lot of the times of trying to take the high road, because while you think you're just walking along the high road, these bunnies are taking jackhammers and busting up the foundation. Okay, so we know things are collapsing in Bunnyworld because remember there was such a big fanfare for New Jeans, well, when they were like NJZ and open up all these social media accounts and saying like, we're NJZ. Well, they've taken down those social media accounts and they've renamed some of the ones that they have actually just let continue on to MHDHH. Those are the initials for the members. I thought it was just a new shipping logistics like a UPS or DHL or something. And we're still putting the Lego blocks together in this whole Kakao situation. Like, how much push did Kakao give to New Jeans Land to give them so much confidence that, hey, continue, just try to run this con to the end and, we'll be there with you at the finish line. Well, Kakao has been convicted again for fraud in the music industry, this time for manipulating social media and K forums, and then also doing stuff to competing labels that is not so good. And so this type of situation, again, willing to go along with like this ruthless thing and adding perhaps at that time, the plan was to steal ADOR, adding that to the whole Kakao portfolio. Hey, may have been quite logical. So again, this trial is going to take literally forever if they don't settle, because the problem with going to court is that each hearing is about 2 to 3 months spaced apart. Why is that important? Because the judge is going to ask questions that need to be answered. And so if your side answers it right away and the other side rebuts it right away, then you have like this, this one side and the other side's response to talk about at the next hearing. However, the strategy to delay the hearing is that one side will, on time or immediately, answer the judge's questions. But the other side that wants to delay will respond to the judge's questions and not fully the night before your hearing. So this side hasn't had enough time to then respond to this side's rebuttal, and therefore you ask for an extension and you just prolong the conversation to the next hearing, which could be 2 or 3 months later. This is how easily this type of lawsuit can go on for years up until the end of New Jeans' contract, especially if you count in appeals and going to the appellate court and then appealing all the way to the Supreme Court if it even qualifies for that type of situation. And the judge says that this breakdown of trust is abstract. Usually the breakdown of trust is visible all at once. We've handled cases where people signed contracts, did idle activities, and never received any settlement. And then they asked to terminate the contract because the trust was broken. But compared to those cases, this is like a special case. And it's a situation where he said that he's going to have to carefully consider how loss of trust should be interpreted. So things are not looking good for New Jeans. Of course, they can just end this tomorrow by going back to HYBE and ADOR and trying to patch things up. However, they stand unified, you guys, unified, that they will never, ever do that because that's what they said. And, well, actually, if Mama says it too, they got to go along. And so I don't know what the end game is for them because really they are at a standstill where they cannot perform, they cannot do any activities. And so that standstill is like the kiss of death for an artist in the fast changing K-pop industry. So it's only going to hurt them. And already we're seeing divisions within their fandom. The bunnies are arguing with each other, some saying that New Jeans should just go back to ADOR. But of course, there's going to be the die-hard, very toxic, very strange. We'll go into it in a different video, the whole thing about the toxic fandoms, especially the ones that seem to be clinging on to New Jeans like barnacles. Very, very ugly and seems to be encouraged by the group and New Jeans Mama and their overall strategy we have seen to employ this fandom to just attack and destroy indiscriminately. Because of what? Because of what? They don't even know your name, although they know some of the names. They know some of the most toxic ringleaders of that bunny circle and seem to be real good, real tight with them, and okay with what they're doing. That's the part that is horrendous for everybody, and we've already seen the effects that has on K-pop fans and the K-pop idol groups, Islet, LE SSERAFIM in particular, and how these girls have had to withstand, weather that, and then now it looks like they're thriving and are stronger because of it. Unfortunately, they had to go through it. Fortunately, it looks like they have built strength from it, but they shouldn't have gone through it to begin with. All right, guys, what do you think? Put your comments below. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.